Hello again, everybody. Welcome to part two of this edition of Nitro Memories. Back in part one, I discussed what the World Wrestling Federation was like in the spring of 1986 in my memories. This time in part two, let's look at NWA as far as Jim Crockett Promotion goes in the spring of 1986. And obviously, the spring of 1986 saw the very first ever Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament. It was looked okay. There was not a lot of hype behind it. It was in New Orleans at the Superdome where the Road Warriors won the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup and $1 million. I distinctly remember that event alone, just for the fact that the winning team won a check for $1 million. That's a lot of bread, a lot of money back in that day in 1986. I did not even see it on video when I started watching on VHS tapes. I did not see that come out on VHS tape or not. I think there's some YouTube videos out there on the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup in New Orleans, the very first one. But I distinctly remember the Four Horsemen really coming to prominence. Ric Flair was feuding with Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, Ronnie Garvin, all for the World Heavyweight title. You see Tully Blanchard fighting with Dusty Rhodes for the umpteenth time, but it keeps getting better for the World Television title. You saw Arn and Ole Anderson emerge as one of the top teams for the NWA World Tag Team titles. Speaking of the NWA World Tag Team titles, the champs at that time was the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette. By the way, I highly recommend you listen to the Jim Cornette Experience and Corny's Drive-Thru on Spotify or any of your listening devices. It's real good stuff. The Midnight Express were the World Tag Team Champions, and they were going to feud with a team called the James Gang, a.k.a. Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA. It happened around right after the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup in May of 1986. That would escalate into probably one of the hottest and one of the most despicable incidents, I will say, in the history of worldwide wrestling. And I saw that live on WPHL TV 17 in Philadelphia, as the announcer always says. Meanwhile, the Rock and Roll Express were chasing after the Midnight Express in the World Tag Team titles. But they were starting to break Rick Morton and Robert Gibson also in the singles competition, and they were really pushing Ricky Morton towards getting a World Heavyweight title match against Ric Flair. And I think by the beginning of the summer of 1986, you would see Ricky Morton pin Ric Flair on nationwide TV. That would set that up. As far as the Road Warriors go, the Road Warriors, of course, the winners of the first ever Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament, they were also hot and heavy involving the World Tag Team Championships against the Midnight Express. They were facing the Four Horsemen, and they were just awesome. And they were co-branding with the AWA at that time to do some house shows like Wrestle Rock 86. The Road Warriors came back to the AWA for one night to wrestle the fabulous Freebirds, Michael Hayes and gorgeous Jimmy Garvin inside of a steel cage at Wrestle Rock 86. More about that in part three of the Nitro Memories. So in essence, for Jim Crockett Promotions, they were setting up for probably one of the biggest and most successful tours, and one of my personal favorites, the Great American Bash 86 tour, where Ric Flair was going to defend the title in most of the Bash cities against a wide variety of topics like Road Warrior Hawk at Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, Robert Gibson, Ricky Morton, Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA. And one of the other big things that happened in the spring of 1986 was Russia versus America. Nikita Koloff, one of the most intimidating people I've ever seen in my life, against Magnum TA. Of course, Magnum, I remember Magnum and Koloff on Worldwide, they had that contract signing where Nikita or Ivan made a comment about Magnum's mother that was right there, and they fought in the conference room, and after that incident, Bob Geiger stripped Magnum TA, for that action. Magnum's like, what the heck are you want me to do? It's my mother being there. And Bob Geiger's like, well, quite frankly, your mom shouldn't have been there. Magnum ended up slapping Bob Geiger right in the face, who at that time was the president of the National Wrestling Alliance. Magnum was stripped of the U.S. title in late May, and we would see probably one of the best feuds of the summer of '86, the best of 7 between Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff. So in essence, Jim Crockett Promotions in the spring of '86 held the Jim Crockett Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament. The very first one held in New Orleans, won by the Road Warriors. We saw Ric Flair getting ready for the Great American Bash, still the world champion. The Midnight Express were taking on the James Gang of Magnum TA and Dusty Rhodes, of course, Magnum versus Nikita for the U.S. title. That's it for part 2 of Nitro Memories. Coming up in part 3, I'll round out what happened elsewhere in the wrestling world in the spring of 1986. Until then, I'll see you next time. So long, everybody.